welcome back. Today I'm going to be taking you through my linebacker rankings for the 2025 NFL Draft. If you do enjoy the content, please consider liking and subscribing as it greatly supports the channel. I won't dilly-dally too much on these first few, but we begin at number 10 with Kobe King out of Penn State. This is a very physical defender, which led to his best trait being the ability to disengage from blockers, which is an excellent trait to have for a linebacker, but just too many gaps in his game, both physically and mentally. At number 9, I've got Chris Paul Jr. out of Ole Miss. This guy's pretty quick and bouncy, which has allowed him to flash and make some plays, but he's undersized, and it just felt like he was more keen to make plays than to actually be the dependable piece that a defense should be looking for. Just too many times where I saw him misread where he needs to be, both against the run and in coverage. Number 8 is Cody Simon out of Ohio State. This is someone who has a pretty nice feel for positioning and seems to play with a competitive attitude, but again, slightly undersized and no real agility or burst that gives me confidence to think that those solid instincts are going to be enough to make him a consistent starter. And then just before we get to what I'm considering the big 5, I have similar evaluations on these next couple. Number 7 is Barrett Carter out of Clemson. This is one that shows flashes to me with the way he wraps up his tackles. He's not a complete disaster instinctually. I've seen him diagnose and plays effectively and position himself nicely in coverage, so he might have more potential in that area. He moves pretty well, and at just 6 foot flat, his 231 pounds fills him out nicely, but it was just a bit too inconsistent. I saw him end up on the wrong side of blocks often enough to put me off in the early round conversation. And same goes for my number 6, Jeffrey Basser out of Oregon. Basser is more athletic than Carter, which obviously gives him some genuine upside, which shows up particularly in his sideline-to-sideline range, but he's another one that I just found to be in the wrong place too many times, especially against the run. But there's now a bit of a jump in my estimations as we get to the 5 prospects who I have as first or second rounders, and it starts at 5 with a tough evaluation in Jalon Walker out of Georgia. No particular reason for why I include him in this video and not the Edge video. This is just how I had him listed going into the evaluation. But here's the big question with Walker. Is he someone who excels at both edge and at linebacker? Or is he someone who is too flawed to hold down one position? And right now, I believe he is closer to the latter. I think one misconception is that he's even been playing as a pure off-ball linebacker because he's been lining up in the box a lot this season, but really just as a guy who poses the threat of a blitz. Even against the run, it's been mainly trying to penetrate the offensive line as opposed to plugging the holes the way an off-ball linebacker would. So as a linebacker, I haven't seen anything to suggest he should be drafted in the first couple of rounds. Now, as an edge defender, I'm a lot more intrigued. He is very explosive, and for his size, he is strong. However, I don't quite see the bend that I would want, especially from this type of pass rusher, because he's 6'1", 243 pounds with 32-inch arms. This is someone you stick out wide, so he doesn't have to engage with the offensive lineman too much. He has the speed to win in this way, but the bend is just as important, and honestly, I just haven't seen it from him. So I have a late second round evaluation on Walker, because the right team could make him a Frankie Louvu sort of pass rushing linebacker specialist, but it has to be the right team, and it's going to take some improvement. At number 4, I have Demetrius Knight Jr. out of South Carolina. Demetrius isn't the most athletic linebacker in this class. He doesn't have the best instincts in this class. He doesn't provide the best coverage in this class. And he's not the best run defender in this class. But he'd be second or third in every category. It's just a really impressive blend of everything I'm looking for in a linebacker. South Carolina was his third college, so at 25, he's an older prospect, but his experience shows up in his feel for space in coverage and his consistency to plug the right gaps against the run. On top of this, he's athletic enough to cover the outside runs and screens. He's well built, tackles consistently. I just think he'll walk into the league as already a good starting linebacker. At number 3, I have Jihad Campbell out of Alabama. This is the consensus number 1 in this class. I like him, and I have him down as a first rounder, but really it would be late first round or early second round, with a couple of other linebackers that I think are worthy of a first round pick. Campbell immediately jumps off the screen when you watch the film. He's extremely athletic, covers the sidelines with ease, he tackles consistently, he actually disengages from blockers pretty well, not because he's overwhelmingly strong, but just because he's so quick that he's sometimes impossible to get a hand on. So why is he not at number 1? Well, both in coverage and against the run, he tends to make up for some lapses in his understanding of the full picture with his speed. But in the NFL, I think it will show up more that he is ending up in the wrong place too often. I guess most people probably see it as, with his freakish athleticism, he's clearly number 1 and then he'll learn the mental side of the game with experience. And that may be the case, but for me with a linebacker, it's all about the mental side of things. There's a ton of athletic linebackers in the league, but there's very few who read the game well enough to be one of the better linebackers in the NFL. So the fact that Campbell doesn't excel in this area means I don't watch him and feel confident that he's going to be an elite linebacker. And if he doesn't improve in this area, his floor could actually be quite low. On the flip side, Jack Kiser out of Notre Dame is my number 2. I did read some other evaluations of this guy to confirm that my assumptions on why he was getting completely disregarded were accurate. And of course, he reads the game well, very instinctive and all that, but don't draft him on day 1 or day 2 because he's not super freakish athletically, he's 24, and I just find him boring. That's what I interpreted from the evaluations that I've read. First of all, he's not that underwhelming as an athlete. Okay, he's not the most fluid in terms of changing direction, so although he played a lot of man coverage for Notre Dame, he's not going to be one that you leave on George Kittle or Kyle Pitts to cover man-to-man. But not once did I have a moment on his tape where I saw him read the play to perfection. If only he had a bit more speed, he would have been right there. It doesn't happen. He's always on it. There are some rare breeds like Fred Warner who have the athleticism as well as the mental side, but there's not a single off-ball linebacker that dominates with pure athleticism. Whereas Jack Campbell, Nick Bolton, Blake Cashman, Jamian Sherwood, these guys are all vital parts of a defense, and it's certainly not because of their speed. I don't want to call anyone out because that's not why I do this, but go back and read the evaluations on those guys I just mentioned. If there's a linebacker who is the heart and soul of your favourite team's defense, but you managed to get him way later in the draft than you should have, the consensus evaluation probably read something like, reads the game well, but underwhelming athlete. And here we go again. Kiser is 24, but even if age is something that you worry about, I bet you Kiser stays in his prime just as long as Jahad Campbell, because Campbell will lose a step and won't have much left, whereas Kiser could play well into his 30s because look at Bobby Wagner at 34, Demario Davis at 36, still one of the better linebackers in the NFL. And it's because even if they have lost a step, they were already 5 steps ahead of everyone else anyway. So I don't worry about age at all in this case because that's what Kiser is all about. Missing a tackle is a rarity for him. I think he will be fine in coverage as he's always in the right position, but especially against the run, I think he's going to be impactful from the first opportunity he's given to start. But easily my number 1 linebacker in this class is Carson Schwessinger out of UCLA. I honestly don't know that there's been a prospect at any position in this draft class who I was more excited to speak about than this guy. He was a 0-star recruit and then barely touched the field until his 3rd and final season with UCLA. And safe to say he was ready for his opportunity. 100 tackles is the most of anyone in this video. And not that the stats are something I really use in my evaluation, but it makes complete sense to me. If you listen to him interview, it's easy to see why he plays the way he does on field. He's a big film watcher, always studying and preparing for his next matchup. And it shows because he just seems to know exactly what's going to happen. And unlike Jack Kiser, he's a really fluid athlete. Great burst about him, changes direction with ease. He tackles very consistently and just always right on top of every run play. Perfectly placed in coverage. He's the only prospect in this video who had 2 interceptions last year. I honestly just don't know what else to say. It amazes me that I'm going against the grain here by having him at number 1, and who am I to say that I'll be right? But from my perspective, it is fascinating, because here's a guy who blatantly mirrors all the traits of the best linebackers in the league, and it's not enough. But there you have it. There never seems to be that many off-ball linebackers coming out of the draft, and I guess this doesn't seem to be the deepest class, but Demetrius Knight Jr. and Jack Kiser I see as good starting linebackers. Jalon Walker and Jahad Campbell I think could be special, but their floor is lower, and Carson Schwessinger I think has a chance to be one of the best in the league. A lot of these guys will be drafted later than they should because the linebacker position seems to be undervalued. I'm not saying it's as valuable as edge, for example, but I would say defensive tackle is a good comparison in terms of value. You probably don't draft them in the first 5 picks, but once you're getting to the 8 to 15 range, why not take the best linebacker in the class if that's what your team needs? As I've tried to express in this video, the best off-ball linebackers are the heart and soul of a defense. They are a constant plaster over cuts in the run game, and in coverage, they aren't so valuable, but anything over the middle in zone coverage is probably going to come down to the Mike linebacker being in the right position. If you did enjoy the content, please consider liking and subscribing, as it would be greatly appreciated. Let me know what your thoughts are on these prospects in the comments below. I'll be covering the safety position next, so keep an eye out for that, and I'll see you then.